Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, it's now noon o'clock where I live, and it's time to start the webinar. Let's see how we're doing here. We've got 20 people in attendance, and that's great. I'm going to drag this over here, get this all set up because I didn't do it in the several minutes ahead of time. Hi. My name is Chris Crowell, and I am the topic strongman for game design with our IGDA Wednesday webinars. And today the topic is multiplayer economy. So I'm just going to flip through some slides here and move us along. This is me. I've been a game designer for a long, long time. I used to be a director of the IGDA. I really believe in the power of games to make the world better. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. Today we have a couple of special guests on our show. We've got Sande Chen, and Sandy's a super energetic atomic reactor for making game design move forward. She runs the game design special interest group with the IGDA. And we've got conversations going on all the time on our Facebook page. And you can reach her at Sande Chen on Twitter, and she's got a blog where she, speaks her mind on a regular basis. And then she's going to be throwing questions at our special guest, Adam Thompson. Adam is an aggressive fellow who is running his own massively multiplayer game, and he's been dealing with a lot of issues with that, and one of those is what we're talking about today, which is how do you let players work and exchange resources and wealth in a game environment. And so check out his Facebook page and check out the game. So with that sort of preamble out of the way, one more thing I want to say. For the first time, we're trying to launch some polls here. So I am going to launch the first poll, which is a question. What's your role in the games industry? So just go ahead and answer that. I've got two more that we're going to throw out over the course of the webinar. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Sande. I'm going to, I never turned on my desktop. Is that correct? Okay, well, hooray for me. Off to Sande, and it goes, take it away, Sande.
Okay. Let me interrupt. It looks like we lost our webcams here when we switched to the poll.
Yeah, we're just in the poll right now.
Okay, is that what's going on?
Yes.
Sorry, folks, this is the first time we're trying to poll, and we did not know that it was going to hijack everything. Looks like we've got 95% in, so that's pretty cool. We've got 33% designers, 28% other. If you're part of that 28%, I'd love for you to just go ahead and say other and post it in the chat window so we have a sense of what's going on. And can we add sound to poll options? I don't know.
Can we close the poll?
Yeah, I'm going to close the poll now and go with that, and then we're going to go back to here.
So now
okay, great.
Is everybody able to chat?
Hi.
Everybody can chat, type in their questions in the chat, and if you have a microphone and you'd like to speak up, go ahead and hold your hand up, and I'll try to turn on your microphone. So I'm going to sort of be the sound engineer for this webinar, and Sandy's going to be throwing out the questions like a croupier in Monaco, and Adam's going to be fielding them and answering them, and I'll chime in as I feel inspired to do so. So off to Sande.
Okay. So we will be opening this up for questions at the end of the webinar. First of all, thank you, Adam and Chris, for coming and getting all of this organized. So first of all, Adam, I see you're working on this MMO called First Earth. Would you tell us something about the added complexities of designing an economy for multiplayer versus single player?
Yeah. There's a game designer, a famous game designer named Richard Bartle, and he defined two types of game economies. He called them open economies and closed. And he says that a closed economy is much simpler, and in my knowledge, a closed economy is what you would typically use in a single-player RPG. In a closed economy, money is created when you kill a monster or something, and then it's destroyed when you repair your armor or something like that. And you can design it so that there's always a constant amount of money in the world at any given time. The alternative type, the open economy, is much more complex, and that's what we see in multiplayer games. So in an open economy, you have the same sort of system, but the amount of currency can change. And he calls this faucets and drains. So if you have a faucet of money from killing monsters, of money coming into your game, that amount of money, if people are killing more monsters, more money comes into the game. And the drains, things like repairing armor, if people aren't repairing armor or if that's not a mechanic they're using, you can end up with something like inflation as more currencies coming in the game. So things like inflation and deflation.
Before you go too far, so you're describing an open and a closed. Is this just for single player? Right now you're discussing the drains and faucets.
Either economy could be for single player or multiplayer. Okay. But typically closed is used in single player and open is used in multiplayer.
Okay, so what would be the challenges of making an open system versus a closed system?
With an open system, the players have more control of what they do with their money and what the value of items and currency is in the game. And when the players have control, that means the player interests may not align with your game design interests. Okay. So if players want to hoard money, for example, that can mess up your design. If people are hoarding money, then there's not enough money to buy goods the way that you designed it, unless you have flexible pricing, which is also complex to do.
Okay, let's elaborate on this. So what sort of player activities in your game would be connected to the economy? How do players affect the economy?
In my game, the biggest things that players can do is invent new types of objects, or you could say invent new craftables. They can produce things or craft things like chop a tree to get a log, and they can trade with each other. And in my game, that's completely open, and it's all player-driven. There are no NPCs or artificially set or set by me prices. So the players completely control the economy in my game's design.
Okay, so I see that in a multiplayer game, the player has a lot of control over the economy. They can affect your economy. And in the single player, most likely they'll be talking to a shopkeeper or some kind of NPC.
You could analogize it to exploration. If a single-player game, you can have the player, you can set a path where they have to explore by following quests along a path. But in a multiplayer game, it's typically more open world. The players might go anywhere. It makes the design more complicated.
Okay. Could you walk us through your approach or thought process when you thought about designing the economy for First Earth?
Yeah, I think Chris wanted to add something.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the faucet and drain theoretical on that, because the way faucets work is this is any way that anything is added to the game world, right? So at the start of the game, you have a finite set of resources that exist at that moment of creation, right, when the game instantiates. And that a faucet is going to be any mechanism that adds more stuff to the game world, right? So it could be, you know, like in World of Warcraft, you have mining nodes that you go around and you find, and you hit those, and you get these resources added to your inventory. So that's a kind of faucet. Going to a merchant and exchanging gold is like a transfer kind of a thing, right? It's a combination drain and faucet. So you're draining the gold, but then in exchange for this different kind of a resource, so that it's a transmutation of resources, and this is something that you get to think about when you're designing the game. And then also, as you say, you have the quest line kinds of things, and those are also faucets into the world. So when you're designing the game, you need to be thinking about all of those in terms of these are things that are dumping more stuff into the game world, and you need to counteract that, or else you're just going to, you know, it's like a bathtub that you're filling up, right? I think that's Bartle's example is a bathtub. You need to have those drains that will empty that stuff out again to keep the player hungry, because it's that getting new stuff and spending it, you know, and having it go away again. That's one of the engines of activity within the game world. And so as a designer, you really need to draw back and see each one of these things. It's like, all right, that's putting stuff in. What am I using to pull stuff out? And really kind of keeping an eye on that and thinking about it from that viewpoint.
Okay, thank you, Chris, on that further elaboration on drains and faucets.
Sandy, would you repeat? Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. It's actually a very good image to think about the economy, to having that faucet of water pouring in and a drain, the water coming out. So the question I had, I think, would interest some of the people on our Facebook group have asked, like, how do we start when we thinking about designing an economy for multiplayer? And since you have this experience with First Serve, how did you first think about what would be my approach?
Well, First Earth is still in early alpha, so I wouldn't say that it has the economy that I've designed for it. A lot of my experience for that comes from games like Ultima Online, which is what inspired this whole project. I would say that if you're designing an economy into a multiplayer game, first you need to know whether this is a game about an economy or whether it's a game about something else that just has an economy in it. If it's a game about economy, then you probably should go all the way and make it as interesting as you can, which means an open economy, a lot of player control over the economy, and you don't have a tight fist around it. As a designer, that's my design method for that. Others might disagree. If it's just a game with an economy in it, you might be better served by a closed economy, something with tighter controls where there's not as much chance of the players messing with it, so that it's the type of thing that you want in your game.
So certainly something like real-world transactions, like EVE is very much based on the economy, so it's a very important part of the game. They have a very open system.
EVE has the most open economy that I know of in the current gen games.
Okay, so we talked about players and they have their own interests. What kinds of cheats that can go on that can affect your economy, like gold duplication, for instance?
Well, I would say that there's two categories. There's actual cheats, and then there's just behavior that affects the economy negatively. Like, so cheats, yeah, gold duplication. I always remember in Ultima, they had servers, and if you crossed a certain boundary on the world, you'd cross between servers, and it would sort of warp you for a second. And there were gold duplication bugs where if you sort of dragged the gold just as you were crossing, you'd end up with 2 piles of gold, twice as much gold. So if you have dupe bugs, which happens in almost every game gets these bugs at some point, suddenly it's huge inflation because there's a ton of extra money coming into the world only by the people who know how to cheat. And that's actually ruined the economy permanently in some games. Chris might know, I don't remember which game this happened to, but There was a game where they had a gold dupe bug, and it went on for months, and they just didn't put it down, and the economy was shot. The other type of behavior I was mentioning is non-cheating, but say that a large guild in the game decides to hold all of their money and not spend it. What will happen is that pretty soon there will be hardly any money in circulation. And so that's deflation. And so that means it'll be impossible for players to buy things at a normal price. Like if a sword is 200 gold coins, but each player only has 10 gold coins because it's being hoarded by somebody else, your economy shuts down. Those are the type of things that can happen.
And I think, oh, okay.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing there that as designers we have some tools to control that. So for instance, the storage of resources is a classic mechanism that we have available, right? And so in a lot of times, you know, like every game has limited inventory space pretty much, right? And then you can buy additional backpacks. So that's one way to sort of force players to use those resources as opposed to hoard them. And you could, if you wanted to, do the same thing with gold or any of the other kinds of things in the game. So that's a tool that we have that we can use in anticipation of these problems, or even in reaction to the problems, to you know, to put limits on it, or make constructing storage part of the gameplay so that the advanced players then have the ability to hold on to more.
One thing that Bartle actually mentions along those lines is making, if you have like a pre-industrial society, making it so that they literally have to have gold, and the gold has weight, so you can only carry so much gold. Ultima was like that for a while.
Yeah. But that's an inconvenience to the players, right? So that's one of those balancing acts where you have your economic concerns and then you have your gameplay concerns. So that's why, you know, we get paid to do what we do. It's not just a freebie.
Yes. So we're familiar with backpack limits and gold limits and such. In a single-player game, for instance, a lot of players do hoard. It's natural. But on the flip coin, which might actually be a cheat or a glitch, the gold duplication, what do you do in situations like that to correct your economy once it happens?
Well, I've never done it myself. Maybe Chris has. What I've seen done, I can think of two things. I've seen rollbacks where they'll actually go to a backup of the entire game world like a day or two ago before the patch, which pisses everyone off because then it's like all the trees you cut during those days are lost and your friends are lost and everything. The other solution I've seen is, well, I've seen them track the gold that was duped or the currency that was duped and take it away from those people. But that can be hard to do because you'll actually get, Ultima had an underground gold laundering operation where players were laundering gold. Like you could go, as an innocent player, you could go to the bank and launder gold for somebody who had duped it in order to make their gold clean. It was crazy.
So we, when I was working on Woo's World, we did have that problem. There was a duplication bug that the players discovered, and so many of them all of a sudden just became filthy rich. And so we really, we actually identified people who had excess amounts in their banks that were ridiculous. Like it was impossible for them to have that much money. And we talked about taking that away. We had a couple of different discussions, and so identifying them and taking it away, I think that's what we ended up doing. We also put in because we basically said, look, if you have more than 1 million gold, that's actually impossible to have in the game. So we just chopped it down to whatever was like, okay, if you've been playing really hard, this is the max that you could possibly have. So we brought everybody down to that. And then we created special millionaire level items so that it just became like if you happen to have a bunch of money, right, and it's sitting around, here's these exclusive things that you could buy. So it's just sort of looking at it, it's like, man,
That's smart.
we have all this stuff in the tub, so to speak. We need another drain to pull that out. And so, like, we made, because the game was all about like your own private space and customizing and whatnot. So I think we made like a special helipad rooms and things like that, so you could really kind of have that. Okay, so if I'm a millionaire, what do I have that makes me different than everybody else? And we just made some items like that, and so people could do that. And you just knew this, like, wow, that's like 100,000 credits to get that thing, which is far beyond most people's means. So it was a way to pull that out and give, because otherwise players feel like they've won the game, right? Like if you have all this money, you can't do anything with it. There's not really any drive to keep playing. So that was the thing that we did, is just put in that millionaire class of things too. So you can be punitive and you can reward also, and that's just a couple of things that are in the possibility space for us.
That's a great solution. And those items don't even have to affect gameplay. They can just be cosmetic.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah. So the glowing steed, or the, some kind of cool thing with like lots of special effects attached to it, there's only going to be a few people in the world, so it's not like you have to worry about, oh, it's Ogremar and I've got 300 people with spewing special effects in all directions. It's only going to be a few, so you can really get pretty extravagant with that kind of thing.
Okay, so my next set of questions are about managing your economy. How would you know if you're in a deflation or inflation cycle? Do you have to have metrics, seeing like what's being sold and for what price, or how would you track all of this?
Chris probably has more experience with this than I do, but I'll just say every game that I know of that has a serious economy does have metrics and stats on it. I think Eve talks about theirs, or they have it at a conference. They actually hired an economist too, so
right.
You can sort of see
a team of economists. But do you anticipate needing to track? Like, are you trying to put in programming to track all your metrics?
I'm trying to get my game done. I'm bootstrapping it, so it's I'm not going to put in any tracking at first. My standard for what makes my economy work is trying to make it realistic. I think that's the only way I can make a working economy that's this open. So if something seems off, I think I'll have to judge it based on what's realistic.
Okay. Chris?
Hey, yeah, there's a question from C.A. Ward. It says, what methods do you use to monitor the health of the in-game economy? And that's what we've just moved into here, so I think that's really valid. Yes, it's essential to have reporting on that at a certain point, right? Like where you're at right now, Adam. Excuse me, I'm getting all choked up. I get very emotional about game economies.
So the more mature, if you want a second to clear it up, the more mature the game is, the more you need those tools. And when you're still developing it, they're not as useful.
Yep. So, but if you're working with programmers and you want to be able to say ahead of time that yes, we're going to need to have this, and there's two things here. We kind of discussed this in a previous conversation, that you've got these reporting mechanisms where you just look at, say, average, how much gold do people have on average? Like what is their inventory like across the game? And you want to look at the very top, like your 1%ers in the game also, and see what's happening with them, and make sure that you're not getting that buildup, that you're always kind of ahead of the curve. So nobody, especially your leading top players, they never reach this point where they're just sort of sitting there like smog on top of a pile of gold with nothing to spend it on, right? Like you want to make sure that you say like, wow, these guys are starting to get a lot of money. Let's throw a millionaire item out there or something out there that they could spend the money on, or aspire to getting. Like if you see that they have 100,000 in the bank, put something out for 200,000, then they're like, I'm rich as anything, but I still can't afford that. I have to play even harder, right? So that's a thing you can do, and it's a wonderful golden carrot that's dangling out in front of them. So it's important to be able to see those metrics. So you want to see what's kind of like what's the average and what are your leading person. I would even argue that the leading ones are more important.
Your 1%ers.
Why is that?
Just because they're leading the charge, and a lot of other people will be looking to them as the model for the ideal player, right? And that's the aspiration. You know, when I see people, when I was younger anyway, and I could aspire to physical perfection, I would watch Olympians on TV and think, man, that's my idol, right? Like, I want to be like a Kenyan runner and just be able to go forever and ever. So that's sort of the role that your advanced players will have. And so that's just on another tangent, having them be visible and you know, be visible as a model to other players lets them know, wow, this game lets me do stuff, and maybe they didn't even know that that was possible to do that in this game space. And they're like, wow, that guy really did something with that. I want to do something like that. I want to be that successful. So that's a really nice thing to have. And so you, just in terms of the game economy, keeping those guys happy is a good thing to be thinking about.
Right, and I would have put a note that for your newbies too, it shouldn't be too expensive so that they can't even play the game.
Right.
So those millionaire items should be for your millionaires, and
yes.
newbie items, because otherwise I've seen prices on items, they seem like they're skyrocketing.
Yeah,
that's a factor of inflation too. If you get that inflation, that'll happen.
Right, and so that's part of that planning, right? Is to say, yeah, well, so you want to sort of have plentiful, cheap resources to make the stuff for the newbies, and then it graduates to much more rare and therefore more precious resources that will combine or just are the resources, you know, the trophy pieces for the really top-end people. And so that's part of your planning spreadsheet, right, is to sort of look at that and think about that. So there's a couple of interesting, I don't know, I don't want to take this thing, but there's a conversation to be had about, like, what is the innate valuation of things in the game, right, in terms of player, in terms of player time or rarity or those kinds of things, and those are knobs that the designer has that they can control.
Well, I've seen games that do that, but the problem I've seen with that is they have to keep adjusting the knobs as players advance or as more gold enters the economy. I'm trying in my game to make it so that I don't have to adjust those, so that the value of everything is automatic, like in your real economy.
Mm-hmm.
But if that doesn't work, you would have to adjust it frequently.
Well,
the problem with the capitalistic forces is that you really need a lot of players. And in the beginning, when EVE launched, they had, I believe this is true, they had a lot of robots to take the place.
Oh, really?
Real people, because when you first launch, you may not have that critical mass to give you the right, like, reasonable prices.
Yeah.
That's a really smart move on their part. They definitely looked ahead. Well, it's certainly something that probably came out during playtesting, right? That it's like, oh, it's like, this is not going to work if we only, like, if only one person or two people are offering this resource.
Right.
They can charge anything.
Yeah.
So they'll be charging a whole bunch of money for something else. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm good. There's a question about Star Citizen.
Yeah. So Michael Calvert, I'm using the Quebecois pronunciation. I hope that's correct. Do you think the subscriptionless economy that Star Citizen is planning to implement will work for them in the long term with server costs, salaries, etc.? So, Michael, that's more of a monetization revenue question.
That's a free-to-play.
Yeah, than an in-game economy. I actually talked about that on the last webinar with the monetization stuff. So, if I'll address that.
Are these going to be available? Your last webinar was on monetization.
Yeah, we should have that available. And if we've got some time at the end, I'll I'll address that specifically, you know, in the public forum. Otherwise, Michael, I'll answer you quietly on the side.
Okay, so the distinction is that the in-game economy is what the players are experiencing while they're playing the game. The actual business model, whether you're free to play or you're having subscription, that is sort of a separate
Right.
from the
Although,
in-game community.
one thing that Barl talks about and that Eve uses is Eve sells, they allow you to exchange playtime for in-game currency, I believe. So,
Yeah, but Eve has is going into the real world economy. A lot of games don't. So
Right.
they allow you to put in, but you can't take out.
right.
But some games do have real world value. I believe there was a virtual bar that sold for billions of dollars.
I remember that. And an island. And there's Second Life, not necessarily a game, but they have their own currency. So
Right. So, I mean, that's a decision also that you would talk with, as a designer, you would have to know beforehand whether or not that there would be conversion between real-world currencies and in-game currencies, and if they would be able to cash out. Because most of the time, you don't cash out. Once you buy money in-game currency, you can't say, oh, I quit the game. Now, translate this back. It's not a casino.
Well, back before the internet got all official, there was a lot of sites, even on eBay, where you could buy and sell gold for all the different games.
Right.
But they sort of smashed that down for that reason.
There's huge legal implications if you build the game specifically that you can exchange the you know, your in-game stuff work to real world wealth, as well as just all kinds of player exploiting, and you know, like you basically open Pandora's box to every kind of scam artist in the world, right? Which is just gonna happen. You know, email has become the mechanism for you know, your lost uncle in Nigeria to reach out to you from beyond the grave. So your game will turn into that. So that's a thing that you really need to be aware of. If you can plan for it, you can design for it, but it's a huge job, and it will distract you from the main point of, you know, if your game has another main point, right? Like if you want to make a gambling game, or you know, you're doing something where that's a big part of it, then go ahead and do it. But if that's not your main thrust for your game, you probably should avoid that.
Do we have our third poll up?
Yeah, I'd like to post the next poll up. So I'm going to give this one 2 minutes because we found out that it takes over the screen. So I'm going to post this. We could keep talking while people are going, but all the visual will be taken over by this. So I'm going to launch this now. And this one is, since we're talking about the different kinds of game economies, right? Like, what is your favorite game economy, or like what did you like? So just go ahead and vote on this. And
Well, I would answer differently if you hadn't said your favorite game economy. I have to answer E for that.
well, you can. This is a multiple choice, right? Like this is which ones do you like?
Oh, yeah.
I guess.
Select all that apply.
Yeah,
it doesn't let us vote anyway.
I reworded it a little bit, Adam. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's interesting how in the past you could eBay off your characters, but now they are kind of bringing that to where they have control over it, and they will sell you.
Yes.
Like a
Yeah, because they
master.
can make money on that.
Well, that's it exactly, right? Like you're doing this as a business, and if you see somebody else making money, right? So it's astonishing that Ticketmaster hasn't taken over the you know, the scalping business. So that's kind of what we have here. Wow, look at that! Nobody likes Farmville. Nobody in our audience, anyway.
That's a
They
pretty good
certainly
sign.
do have
Yeah.
millionaire items.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, you know, I think that's the kinds of people who are playing that kind of game are not the kind of people that we have in our audience who are going to show up for an IGDA, you know, game design
It's
thing.
not complex game design. Somebody put RuneScape in the chat. I think that's a good answer.
Okay. I'm not familiar with RuneScape. What can you explain RuneScape to me?
I can't see the chat very well.
Well, I haven't played RuneScape, but I know a lot about it because it's a big deal.
Okay.
But it has a pretty open economy. I think you could liken it to Ultima Online. I know it's changed over the years, so I'm not sure how it is right now, though.
Okay, there we go. I'm closing the poll.
But it's another of these games where you can trade almost any item, unlike World of Warcraft.
And I like the ones where you can design your own clothing and try and sell. That's sort of similar to Second Life. But they also have it, I believe, in Gaia Online, where you could open a shop or you can get sort of good with the tools. And The Sims used to do it too.
Right.
People did it. I think we had a question about Second Life. I don't remember it went.
Sure. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, so Marcello Rigon says, do you think it is possible to have this scaling price based on character levels to split low level from high level gear in games in which you can put game or withdraw it as real world money, like Project Entropia or Second Life? Well, I'll let you guys answer that first.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's possible to have well, you can have a scaling price for things based on character levels, but only if those characters can't really trade with each other or can't use each other's items. Because if they can trade with each other, the high levels will just buy things for the low levels. And I'm not quite sure what you mean, but if you want that split to remain when converting it to real-world money, I don't think that's possible, because once you have a common medium of exchange, like real-world money, anything can cross over.
I mean, I think that we have this interesting kind of thing where you might have a benefactor who wants to give all this great gear to newbies that are entering, but you don't want them to give high-level gear that a newbie could be using. Or they should be able to get the best level 5 gear, perhaps, but not be able to use a level 100 gear. As for cashing out, I think that's a decision you have to make for your entire game, and you wouldn't break it up between levels or things. But certainly the different prices would be scaled from the levels, the lower levels to intermediate levels to higher levels.
Or can be scaled. They don't always have to be.
I don't know if we actually answered the question, but maybe you can elaborate.
Well, you know, I think, yeah, the elaboration of the question would be fantastic. There's one of the ways that this is classically dealt with in games is to have a minimum level on gear, right?
Right, level restriction.
Exactly. The rationale for that is that you don't want to have someone so OP at a lower level that the game becomes boring to them, right? Like, you have to have that challenge line, so, you know, not too hard and not too easy, so that that challenge is just right. And so you can wreck that for early people. Yeah.
The reason you can wreck it, though, to keep in mind the context, is because you typically design the game so that the leveling is what you do. So you're killing, you know, level 35 mobs. So if you're overpowered there, but if it were a flat world where there weren't different levels that you had to progress through, then that would no longer be a problem.
True. So you could just, let's say in your world, Adam, that I would normally, because I've only been playing for a while, I managed to get, you know, stones attached to sticks, so I've got like a club kind of a thing. And then someone came along and gave me a submachine gun, right, to sort of help me out.
Right.
That's, you know, my character, it's just my little guy running around, right? So I can use the guns. Suddenly I'm not that much more powerful, right? So so obviously the value of that machine gun is probably more than I could pay anybody at like, I'm not worth it to anybody else, except maybe I would swear an oath of fealty at that point.
Your friend or something.
Yeah, or it's my friend or something else. Now, there's an interesting thing here that pops up, right, where you have the economy driving interesting other social paradigms in the game, right? So and it goes back to that, like that basic concept of what is valuable to players is something that as a designer you have to be thinking about all the time, and it may be a tangible resource that can stack up in your inventory, or it may be something like I don't know, friendship or you like being part of my guild or you know, that you will become my minion. You know, just you'll choose to do that because I'm the gateway to giving you awesome stuff, right? So there's some interesting things that will come out of that I, as a designer, I find really fascinating. Players are always amazing me with the kinds of things that they're doing with the games. And the more open the system, the more emergent the results and the more fun surprises and horrible surprises you find from the players.
I agree completely.
Yeah, I think in a traditional RPG you do have these levels, but if we think about a non-traditional MMO like a politics game, civics perhaps, then there are no levels. And it's just people talking about what they want to be changed in the world. And you become more recognizable by how many causes you champion. So in that case, the sense of levels don't really have anything other than popularity or something like that, which is not.
Was that just hypothetical, or is there a game like that?
I believe A Tale in the Desert is about that.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know if they have levels. I have not played it.
I haven't played it. I know about it, but you know.
Okay, I'm going to run another poll here. We just got the 20-minute warning, so these hours go by so fast. I'm going to run one more poll about, just because we want to know who's out there in the. I'm going to launch it right now. I'll run it for 2 minutes.
And also, if you have questions, put them in. We're going to open it up.
Right.
Getting more questions from the audience.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you have specific questions about game economy, other kinds of things, if you want us to revisit one of the points and go into more detail, just stick them in there.
This looks like a distribution I'd expect. A lot of newer people.
Yep.
And a few experienced.
Mm-hmm. So, I want to talk about something that we discussed last night, guys. Which is to go back to my earlier point about what's valuable in the games. And the last couple of games that I've worked on have been free to play with, which is really a model that's coming up a lot. And so, as I was designing the economies, I had to think, all right, what is valuable to players in a free-to-play game, right? And it came down to player time. So one approach that I used that I was very pleased with the results was I came up with a basic game economy unit that was based on 10 seconds of player time. And so that was the penny in my game economy that I was then able to use to provide a universal value to everything else. So if I had a resource that I could, like if I had a mini game and I needed to play the mini game for 2 minutes, and I would get on average, I would get X number of these resources out of that, then I could use that to say, all right, so 2 minutes, that means that each one of these things is worth so many gameplay units, and by that value then worked also when for aggregate objects, like in crafting, where I said I need 4 of these, 3 of these, and 2 of these. The cost of the basic cost for that crafted item could be calculated from that basic cost of all the components that went into it, and so that made for a pretty great spreadsheet logic. Looking at things, and I was able to factor all the items in the game with those valuations, and then of course go in and some things are maybe cooler or whatever, and change the just go in and override that calculation. But it gave me a nice base value to look at things on.
That seems like a really good standard. I've never seen that done myself.
I've done it for Quest design too, because, I mean, not 10 seconds, but if we were to look at how much time a player takes on a quest, you don't want to have these things at really, really short quests and then really, really heavily long quests that is not even. So,
yeah.
There's an interesting result there, right? There's a side effect from that, because if you don't do it correctly and you have something that pays you better for a short amount of time, right, than a long, players are going to be mad at you for forcing them to grind on this short-term thing, right? Because it's like you're an idiot if you don't do it, but it's not fun, right? And so they just get mad at you for making them do that. And so it's an interesting side effect I've observed and felt that same way myself, right? So that's another vector in the game economy and how it affects, you know, the game experience.
And that applies also, and Barl mentioned this too, to even without the time component. If there's two ways to do something, and one way is more competitive or more profitable,
easier,
they'll do that even if that way is less fun. So even if that's just clicking the same button over and over, they'll do it, and they'll hate the game while they're doing it.
Yes. Yes, they'll hate the game and they'll hate you. Which
yeah,
is
I'm
not
amazed. There have been some glitches that you would get 37 gold for clicking on a certain item, and I'm amazed that people clicked on this for hours. It was like free gold.
Right.
And I was like, would you have time to do this, or did you do like a third-party like clicker to do this? But it is amazing that players will find everything.
Yes.
If they can find a way to profit in that, they will find the way that is the least resistance, the easiest way, the less torturous way.
So this is a really great reason why. Number one, you want to have that metrics gathering, right? So you can kind of just looking at numbers, you can see some kind of odd bump, right, of what's happening in the game world. And then the other thing is just be really engaged with your community, right? Like a lot of times that leading edge of players is also the people who are really vocal, right? Like they're really into that game. So they want to tell you about stuff that's going on, and they will view that as like they have ownership of the game experience too, like they feel that, and they will tell you, hey, there's a bug here and it's wrecking it. Like I'm playing the game right, you know, I'm the Michael Jordan of this game, but someone else is also scoring high like me too, and I don't like it because they're cheating. Fix that, right? So just by staying engaged with your players and having open communication, that's another way of monitoring the game. And in fact, it might even be better than looking at the metrics, right? And it's something that we already have the tools for that via our Facebook pages or whatever. Just keep those loose lines open and don't crush people who bring you that information.
Well, Sandy, you seem to know about EVE. I know that they had a player council. Do you know anything about that?
I believe they do. What I did was I interviewed the lead economist of EVE.
Oh.
So I do know that they have a team of economists to work on it, try to make it as, they do think of it as like a real economy. In fact, a lot of these MMOs, you can think of them as small countries. Like, if they are trading with real-world currency, maybe they are pegged to the dollar. You don't know. But
and I know a lot of them even have a land area that is sometimes equivalent to a small country.
Yes. Yeah, so you can think of it as a small country. They're not going to be affecting the global economy. They do have an economy. And that makes it, oh, do you have a question?
No, there's AJ Comfort has added in. It says there's a Council of Stellar Management, which sounds pretty great, which is a player-populated council voted for each year. So that would be a great business card to have. I'm on the Council of Stellar Management.
Stellar, yeah.
I heard about when they launched that at GDC, I think, years ago. If I remember right, those were players that were voted on by other players. There's a wiki link.
Okay. Oh, yeah, there it is. That's cool. Thanks, AJ. That's great info. Okay, what else we got?
Okay, yeah, my chat panel seems to have disappeared, so I missed all of that.
Okay. It's on the questions, so pull out the questions panel.
Oh, yeah, that disappeared too.
Okay.
Okay, but you're in charge of the questions. So.
Right,
but
so,
yeah, I just also wanted to point out that my blog covers is open to the community to contribute to and also give topics such as multiplayer economies as to what should we discuss about. We could do another session of this, or we could move on to a different topic. So all of that I'd love to get input on, or you can post in the IGDA Game Design SIG, which is easily found on Facebook.
Yeah, let me get back to that. Go ahead.
Okay, there is a slide where the address is. Of what topics that you would be interested in learning more about or having interviews about, or that we should cover. So I welcome and appreciate all this input as to, so there's the blog and there's the IGDA Game Design SIG Facebook group, and we love to get questions. Game designers are very busy, but if you put a question in the Facebook group, they do answer it. So it is a great resource.
So, Adam, how are you monetizing your game, and how does that tie into the game economy?
That's a good question because it's very important.
Yes.
I decided to make first a subscription-based game. And that's what Ultima was when I played it, and still is. The reason is that if you tie in any sort of real-world incentives to the game economy, I think it would warp it from being a realistic economy. In our real world, the economy doesn't have any sort of outside input. Like, you can't just buy $1 billion for the real world. I think the game has to be the same. So if we're a free-to-play game with items or something, then buying items with real-world money would warp the economy. You'd have to make those items non-tradable, and I think everything has to be tradable to be a realistic economy. Even if they were cosmetic items, the visuals and the cosmetics are still part of the experience, so that's important.
Let me query you on that, because I have some different thoughts on that. Sure. What if I could spend $10 to get some kind of resource, and I buy a 10-pack of the machine guns, let's say, right? Okay. So I've got those. I only want, because I've only got 2 hands, I can only use 2 machine guns at a time. I keep 1 as a spare, and now I've got 7 more that I want to sell off to other players, right? And I've bought those for real cash. Why would you, as the person running the game, not want to let me do that? Why are you blocking that? Because go ahead.
It's because the creation of those machine guns is part of the gameplay.
Okay.
So it comes in before that. Like, the earliest you could say it comes in is when somebody claims property. So my game is a replica of the North American continent to scale, and when we launch, players are going to be able to claim property. And so you could say it starts there. And I've thought about charging people to claim property rather than charging for the game monthly. But I'm not sold on that, because even if it doesn't influence the game's economy, it still creates an imbalance between players who have money and who don't. And I remember when I was 14, 15, I was playing Ultima, and I loved it because I was equal to everyone in that game, and you couldn't have that if it were money.
Okay, so that's definitely one viewpoint. There's another consideration in terms of, okay, so when you're 14 or 15, you have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And let's say that now I'm a 45-year-old lawyer who doesn't have a lot of time, but I really like this game and I want to play it, so I just want to be able to buy my BMW. I want to give you $20 to buy my fiery steed or whatever, because I don't have 200 hours to grind for it, right, or to play the game. I understand your theoretical from a design point of view, but
you're absolutely right about
from a business point of view, yeah.
And I buy things. I buy WoW gold and stuff because I don't have time. Because I can spend an hour clicking in WoW, or I can spend 10 minutes billing by the hour, and I'll make more money. But I solved that in my game too, because I want my game to be for people like you or I, or the 15-year-old, people who don't necessarily have a ton of time to play. So the mechanic in my game is that time can be saved up. So everybody is constantly gaining time, whether you're online or offline. So you'll be able to do just as much actions, even if you only play 1 hour every 2 weeks. That's kind of my goal. Like a 1 to 2 hour session every 2 weeks should be the minimum that you have to play. That's
a great solution, and that's did that take extra programming, I'm assuming?
Yeah. It's sort of like a power bar that, that grows over time, but it happens while you're offline. And you can use the time to multiply certain actions, and I'm still implementing some of that. But so if you chop a tree, you can multiply it with your time by like 100 if you have saved up time, and you'll get 100 trees.
All right. Okay. Well, we've hit our hour. It went by really fast, and I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming. I really want to thank Sande and Adam for joining in. I thought this was a really great webinar session. It's certainly a lot better than me just sitting here talking to a PowerPoint presentation and talking about things. So this is great. I hope you in the audience had some great information come out, and you can reach us at send any kind of feedback or love letters to the webinars at igda.org. We definitely read those, and I'm taking suggestions for upcoming topics, and this is just the third one of these things, so still kind of feeling our way along, but we're looking forward to being able to do this. Remember, this is for game developers, so we want this. We're doing this for everybody else. So whatever it is that will be useful to you, let us know. Go ahead, Sande, Adam.
Thanks, and we love to do this again, and hope to bring interesting topics to you. So please give us feedback as to what you would be interested in hearing about. So thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. And if anyone wants to ask about my game or contact me personally, please feel free. And I hope we get to do another one of these.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close this down now. Thanks to everybody. Have a wonderful day. It's the middle of summer, so it's really great. Unless you're in the southern hemisphere. So sorry about that, you guys.
Have a wonderful winter.
Yeah, have a wonderful winter. Merry Christmas, I guess. Okay. Sayonara, folks.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.